It's good to be with you this morning. I'd like to begin with a poem that's set as our first reading today. It's by Cami Dennis. I'm building a home for myself where doors don't slam and people don't yell, and love is scattered across a kitchen table that was built with kindness and respect. I'm building a home for myself where the floors can be painted yellow and the tables can be painted blue, because there is no right way to do anything except to do it with you. I'm building a home for myself that will echo the feelings that live deep inside my chest, but you will know that when you step inside the rooms that were built by people who love one another with nothing but respect. I'm building a home for myself that was made for lovers like me, where there is space for you to be everything you've always wanted to be. The theme today is home, and home can refer to three things. It can be a physical place where we live or have lived. That places is imbued with memories and feelings, some good, some not so good. That place can also shape an ideal or goal of what we'd hope for in any future place we call home. Margaret Atwood, the Canadian author and poet, and maybe a comment on her poem called The Moment, she writes, "I planted my flag here, how could I not have? I claimed a home when what I longed for was to be claimed by a place, to have place say to me, 'Come home, little one, rest here.'" Nowadays, many of us are aware that land and physical place are not just passive things, objects we acquire and own, but are interactive subjects, shapers of home. In The Moment poem, Atwood gives a voice to the earth, trees, birds and air who say, "You own nothing, you are a visitor, time after time. We never belonged to you, you never found us, it was always the other way round." So that's the first meaning of home, physical place. The second meaning is relationships, of which, following Atwood, the hills, trees, earth and insects can be included. But usually our first thoughts go to people, in particular family, those of the past and those still present. Family is the context where we first learned about love and hopefully experienced some of that love unconditionally. We learned all sorts of messages, all sorts of feelings. We're schooled in behaviours and then have spent a great deal of time for the rest of our life examining and emulating or expunging those messages, feelings or behaviours. Most people try to create a family of their own or are invited into one. We try to do our best in the relationships department, praying that others will experience love in all its wonderfulness and complexities, rather than the pain of the paucity of love, or the conditionality of what came in the disguise of love. Home, like love, can be complicated. Many of the poems there are about home describe an ideal, like the one I read to you from Cami Dennis. Such ideals are usually shaped not by what the author has experienced, but by what they wished they had experienced, and what they wish others, especially their beloved children and grandchildren, to experience in the future. It's easy to imagine in Cami's poem the slamming of doors and yelling, and the children learning the adrenaline taste of fear. And it's easy to imagine them being told the right way to do anything, and feeling the gaze and stigma of disapproval. And it's easy to imagine a home where love is not married to respect, and the home initiates and teaches a destabilizing pattern that will mar the child and potentially the adult the child grows into. To idealize our home of yesteryears is a way of coping with unpleasant and disturbing memories. We paint over those memories as best we can. Paint over the slams and yells, disapprovals and worse. And instead we remember the good times of laughter, goodness, and feeling being affirmed. And then we put those good times on repeat again and again. Until the day when we can look at it as it really was and feel without the bile of bitterness arising some sense of acceptance of what home did to us, made us, shaped us, which is woven, of course, into accepting ourselves, the bits we like and the bits we like to keep hidden. And that is the third meaning of home, coming home to oneself. Coming home in this sense is not primarily about a place, though place is still important, nor coming home in this sense is primarily about relationships, though relationships still are very important. Rather, it is about knowing yourself enough, forgiving yourself enough, loving yourself enough to be at peace in yourself, to be at home in your body, mind, and soul. I suspect T.S. Eliot in Little Gidding, in those renowned verses, "We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." I suspect Eliot was not talking about returning to a physical place or to relationships. The poem, in all its complexity, with the heartache of war, religious imagery, and hope intertwined, is about seeking truth and finding in that exploration inner truth. All will be well, and all manner of things shall be well when the fire and rose are one. Coming home to oneself where the fire and rose are one. Eliot's contemporary, J.R. Tolkien, also affected by the wars of Europe in the first half of last century, wrote about inner peace and home. In the Lord of the Rings trilogy, home for the hobbits is the Shire, and for the hobbits their home seems all important. It's what they think of when despondent. It's what they think of when they charge into battle against evil. Green rolling Matamata hills, mild weather, fantastic food and merriment in every corner, and homes built to highlight the intersection with nature all around them, rather than destroy nature like Saruman and Sauron did. Frodo Baggins, the preeminent hero, bears the ring of power which must be destroyed, and it takes 3 books, 1,800 pages, 3 movies, 8.5 hours of viewing to reach the end. Once the ring is destroyed, however, the hobbits must rescue the Shire, their home, from the enemy. Eventually everything returns to normal and the Shire reverts to what it once was. And yet it's no longer a home for Frodo. He has everything that should make it a home. It's familiar, his loved ones are there. He has taken true ownership of it and it has claimed him. It's a sanctuary from the wider world. But Frodo is no longer the same. And while other heroic hobbits settle, Frodo doesn't. Sometimes the home we've known, belonged to, felt safe in, were loved by, is no longer the place we need to be or can be. Life, the purpose we have pursued, the scars we have endured, our loves and losses have changed us. And so it was with Frodo. And as Tolkien was thinking of others who had endured wars. To pursue inner peace, he left the Shire for a new home. The Gospel reading today is from Mark 3 and 6 about Jesus' relationship with his hometown of Nazareth. The Gospels as a whole paint a complex picture of Jesus in relationship to home. On the one hand, we are given the birth narratives, Matthew and Luke, of a holy family, an image of Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus. And in other parts of the Gospels, there is a faithful mother image, or first disciple image of Mary, as a follower all the way to the cross. We also have his biological brother James, leading the movement in Jerusalem in the years after Jesus died. On the other hand, as in our reading today from Mark 3, Jesus saying, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those sitting around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers." Which isn't particularly family friendly when you're his mother or brothers. And we have in Luke 9, Jesus saying, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." In other words, Nazareth is not my home. I have no home. In that same passage, when a follower says, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father," Jesus replies, "Let the dead bury their own dead. As for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." In other words, your duty and love for your family is secondary to what I'm asking you to do for the kingdom of God. To decipher all this, we need to firstly remember that each gospel is a compilation of community stories and recollections. And each gospel was written in different decades. So Mark, the earliest of the four gospels that made it into the Bible, was written, compiled about 30 to 40 years after Jesus' death. Whereas the birth story in Luke may have been written, compiled as late as 70 to 80 years after Jesus' death. The rule of thumb for interpreters is usually the earlier a text is written, the more historical it is. So in Mark, there is no Joseph. Did he die early? Was he a fictitious character created to gloss over an illegitimate and or non-consensual conception? What about Jesus' siblings, though? Was there a stepfather? There's a reference in Mark to Jesus being a carpenter, which is better translated as a day labourer on construction sites, which Matthew, writing a couple of decades later than Mark, makes into the carpenter's son. But there are no nice stories about Jesus learning how to chisel wood in Daddy's workshop. In Mark, there is also no Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a creation of later writers who wanted to strengthen the idea that Jesus was the new Messiah, the new David. Remember, King David was born in Bethlehem. No, Jesus' hometown was always Nazareth. Yet all the Gospels record Jesus not being welcome in his hometown in Nazareth. Was this a case of tall poppy syndrome? Or had his vocation to teach, heal, and confront the iniquities of his society offended the locals? Or was it felt that he had abandoned his own birth family and responsibilities as the eldest son? The great anti-war activist and teacher Father Daniel Berrigan once wrote a reflection on Jesus titled, "And his family thought him mad." It's taken from Out of His Mind, passage from Mark 3. It can take families quite some time, if ever, to reconcile themselves with those who are outliers to the norms of the family, who don't follow in the family business, who don't take up conventional careers, who follow maybe the leanings of their hearts or are driven by deep and inescapable yearnings to make a difference in a different way than what the family had previously done. My own reading of these threads is that at various points Jesus' family struggled with understanding him. Like with all the disciples, they probably struggled with Jesus' confrontational approach, not just vis-a-vis the religious authorities, but also the political, read Roman authorities. Why offend them when they had so much power to hurt and harm? And I suspect Jesus too struggled at times with his family, particularly his childhood friends in Nazareth who didn't understand him. As for a physical home, I don't think he ever found one to call his own. I suspect he felt at home in the house of Mary, Martha, and her brother Lazarus, or in the home of other friends and followers. But home as a permanent physical place, I think, eluded him. Later writers would try to make this into a virtue. As for a home and relationships, I think his discipleship group became, in all their wonderfulness and dysfunctionality, something of a home for him. And I also suspect that his mother and his brother James were part of this. As for coming home to himself, finding inner peace, I'd like to think so. Sometimes, though, teachers are teaching what they'd like to be, or are on their way to being. Was Jesus similar? I suspect in some things he would have said he had arrived. Other things he might have said that he was on the journey. And other things, the goal was in the far distance. Sometimes purpose and passion can get in the way of inner peace. And sometimes they can lead to it. Blessings to you this week.